asking which sea is the saltiest natural lake and is also the lowest elevation on the face of the earth?
Yeah, so that would be the Dead Sea. If we jump to my screen really quick. So I think, yeah, something that maybe I could do more often that might be kind of helpful is if we talk about features like this, I could actually show where they are. But this is the location of the Dead Sea. It's on the border between Jordan and Israel. You can see Egypt over here. And I'll just zoom in a little bit, not to the Mediterranean, but here to the Dead Sea. And I'll maybe do Earth view so we can see what it looks like. So there's the Dead Sea. So the Dead Sea is indeed the lowest elevation point on the Earth, and also what was the first part of the question, Caitlin? Saltiest natural lake, yes. I think that there are actually several other hypersaline lakes like the Dead Sea that might compete for saltiest lake, but the Dead Sea is definitely one of the saltiest on Earth. Its salinity is like 34%. It's 10 times as salty as the ocean is. And the reason that it's called the Dead Sea is for reasons you might expect. Being that there's so much salt in the water, it's actually really prohibitive to the growth of life. So you don't have a lot living in the sea, so it is a dead sea in that sense. And I think I'll just talk briefly about sort of why, like how the Dead Sea formed and other seas or lakes like it. Folks here in the west of Colorado might think of the Great Salt Lake over in Utah as being kind of analogous to the Dead Sea here in the United States. But one way to understand the Dead Sea and sort of how it forms is to understand the concept of drainage basins. So all water, this is going to sound really obvious, but all water flows downward, or like moves downward toward the ocean. All drops of water, like if you drop them outside, will try to seek what's called base level. And base level for any drop of water is, ultimate base level is the ocean, but it's whatever the local water table is at. So here in Denver, the part of Denver we're in, I would guess that we have a small drainage basin that's connected with Cherry Creek, which is just down the road. So if I drop some water out on the street, it would get, no doubt, absorbed, and some of it might evaporate, but some of that water would run slowly but surely down into Cherry Creek and would be part of the Cherry Creek drainage basin, which feeds into the Platte River drainage basin. And drainage basins can be small if we're just talking about a single river, but we can also think about really large drainage basins like the Colorado drainage basin. Colorado River drains all of, or not all of, but most of the western United States. The Mississippi River drainage basin drains most of the eastern United States and Midwest. And most rivers eventually flow to an ocean. But there are some cases where, because the continental crust in a particular area is so low that it would actually be lower than any escape route for the water, water will end up pooling in an area that usually forms either a lake or a sea. And we call these areas basins, but just like the drainage basins, what we might call these closed drainage basin systems. So the Dead Sea, and here's just an image of the Dead Sea, or a photograph of it. The Dead Sea is fed by the Jordan River, but it has no outlet to the ocean. And the Jordan River flows into it are not as great as the amount of evaporation that happens to it. And so the intense amounts of salt that are in there have to do with the rock that the Jordan River flows through. But then when there's salt deposited in the lake, that salt just stays there, and as the water evaporates off, the salinity of the lake is able to increase. So these are salt deposits around the lake that have precipitated from the water itself. And here's kind of a fun image. This is sort of like a classic Dead Sea image. There's a guy floating in the Dead Sea reading a newspaper because salt water is much more buoyant than fresh water. Having all that salt in the water makes the water more dense, so we humans float more easily on top of salt water. And you can go test this in the Great Salt Lake if you want. I don't actually know if they allow swimming in the Great Salt Lake, I'm not sure, but if they did, you would float pretty well in there. And if anybody's even been to the ocean, you'll know that you float better in the ocean than you do on like a freshwater lake or in a pool, for example. So, and you know, there are also many folks who think that the salty waters of the Dead Sea and seas like it have lots of benefits for skin health and other types of health. So many people seek out soaking in places like the Dead Sea for medical reasons and I think also spiritual reasons. But yeah, that's what the Dead Sea is, and again, it is one of the saltiest lakes in the world, and definitely the lowest elevation point. Oh, and not to talk too much, but I was really going to say, yesterday we talked about plate boundaries on our show, which you can definitely find on YouTube or livestream.com. But there's a certain kind of plate boundary, tectonic plate boundary, called a transform boundary, and it's believed that the Dead Sea, this sort of depression that is the Dead Sea, is formed from a gap that's been made as a transform boundary, a boundary that slips like this against itself. It's just a gap that was made as that boundary slips apart. So,
Makes a lot of sense.
anyways, just thought I'd throw that in there.
All right. I was going to ask why is it the lowest after
Yeah,
you finished
that's-
anyway, so I was going to ask you to add to that. So
It's good. It's usually either that or it's something with tectonic plates, typically.
makes sense.